Well, it is Friday night, and it is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you know what time it is. It's time for the Friday night show. We talk mostly West Virginia here, but we'll talk about some other stuff as well. But we have to talk about last night's game, that is for sure. But before we go on any further, anybody that hasn't already, please hit the like button. Even if you don't like me or this channel or the show, whatever, it just helps the video with the YouTube algorithm, gets it suggested more people see it, more people click on it, and that's how you grow the audience. So you're not just helping us, you're helping yourself, because you can grow the audience and you'll have more people to trash talk to. So that's how you think of it, hitting the like button. Besides that, if you have a question, comment, you want to troll me, hey, I got thick skin, it's okay. Best way to get my attention is that super chat button. It is the little dollar sign that you see on the bottom right hand corner under the comment section. Anything that you put in that super chat, hey, I'll throw it on the screen. And even if you're trolling me, we appreciate you supporting the show so much that I will still read the troll comments. That's how we roll around here. How's everybody doing? I'm doing fantastic. It's finally a great week to be a West Virginia Mountaineer fan. I'll say that for sure. Didn't get off to a good start, man. Thought we were going to do it again, guys. The mistakes. We have got to clean up the mistakes. But I did a live show. I live streamed the entire game. I probably went through every emotion that you could think of. I was mad, happy, sad, frustrated, thankful. All of it. All in one live stream. You saw it all if you joined me live. So that was a great live stream. I had a lot of fun, especially since West Virginia won. That's what made it even more fun. Otherwise, I'd probably be a little more angry right now. A little bit more angry. But in spite of all those mistakes, we still won. We still won. We had a great second half. That's what really won us the football game. I think we outscored Virginia Tech something like 20-3 or 27. I think it was 20-3. We outscored Virginia Tech in the second half. So that's where the game was really, really won. And moving forward, our schedule gets really, really tough. This was a must-win situation for West Virginia because honestly, Virginia Tech was the easiest opponent left on the schedule. So if we didn't win this game, it was going to be a long season. Probably not even get to a bowl. Seriously. Travis Kenobi, what's going on, buddy?
What's going on?
Feel a lot better now. How about you?
Yeah, no, I feel pretty good. It was a good game. A lot of good things to write home about.
Yeah.
Things look a lot better 2-2.
I think there's one thing that we can agree on, and that's the offense for sure is fixed. That's nice to say. Our offense is fixed. It really is. We did make a few mistakes, but every offense does. But JT Daniels, he's the real deal. We found a great running back that nobody was talking about in the offseason, CJ Donaldson. And then, of course, Johnson is a lightning bolt. And then you have Tony Mathis, who's, up the middle pound guy. But Donaldson, I did not realize how elusive that guy is. He's hard to tackle.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have some thoughts on the running back room. I'm sure we'll get to this hour. One thing I saw a lot of last night in the Virginia Tech post-game Twitter sphere and boards was they want Graham Harrell bad. And I don't blame them. Their offensive coordinator did not attack the weaknesses all that well. But, he had a quarterback that probably wasn't capable of attacking those weaknesses well.
No, Grant Wells is not a good quarterback. I think now I'm not a Virginia Tech fan by any means, quite the opposite. But from what I saw from this football game, I think that their plan moving forward needs to be run and short passes, and hopefully you can break some tackles because Grant Wells cannot throw a deep ball. Not at all. Did you see that one play where our defender straight up slipped and there was nobody around? I believe it was Caleb Smith. There was no defender within 10 yards, and Grant Wells overthrows him. How does that happen?
Yeah, Jay Ajayi tripped on that play, and he was wide open. I mean,
Yeah.
touchdown easy, and he overthrew him. Definitely want to talk about the secondary too. That's a topic of discussion for this hour for sure.
I think our secondary played great. I really do.
Well,
there was a few issues, especially in the first half, but I think they really settled in the second half.
Well, it was a tale of two halves for sure. And I think one of the reasons that I want to talk about the cornerbacks so much is that if you remember last week, one of the things that I said is that if Brown continues to be stubborn and not rely on his freshman talent, it will be the death knell of him. And what happened in the second half of that game, Jacoby Spells played a lot more at that second cornerback slot opposite McCormick than he did in the first half. And Jacoby Spells, I said this this morning before the PFF grades were out for the game. I said, look, I'm going to tell you this. I can't wait to see these grades because I think two things are going to happen. One, I think our offensive line played the best game that it's played under Neil Brown.
Yes.
Two, I think that I think that Ajayi is probably the worst graded defender on the team. And I think Jacoby Spells is in the top 3. And when I saw the PFF grades, 4 offensive linemen were the top 4 offensively graded players. Spells was the second rated defender, and Ajayi was dead last. So at least PFF matched the eye test, because that's what I saw last night, is that Spells, you can't play him every down because he's a true freshman and they're just not up to, like, their conditioning here is different than in high school.
Right.
But you got to play him more because he is who we thought he is who we thought he was.
Yeah, when we won that recruiting battle, I made a big video about that. We straight up stole a player from Miami because Miami was recruiting him heavily. And right before he picked West Virginia, everybody was saying he was going to pick Miami. So that was a massive, massive win for West Virginia. And we saw last night firsthand why he had such a high grade and why he was, recruited so fiercely. The dude he's an athlete, straight athlete. I think we're going to see a lot more of Mumu as well, because one thing about Mumu is his recovery speed is one of the best you'll ever see. He's not great off the blocks, so you got to watch those short routes, but he has great recovery speed whenever it comes to that deep ball. Now, the defense that we like to play is, simplified terms, is basically handed off type. So basically a safety will come out and he'll hand him off to the safety if he goes up high. But his recovery speed is there, and I expect Mumu to see a lot of action as well if he don't get injured.
So we played that. That's one of the things that we talked about last week too, is the frustrating part about the Kansas game to me. The most frustrating part was that we didn't seem to make any second half adjustments. And if we did, they didn't show up. I thought we actually made some pretty good adjustments in the second half against Virginia Tech. And one of those was moving Spells in and taking Ajayi out. And the other was going to a lot more man coverage sets.
Yes.
Which gave our
zone in the first half. I didn't understand it.
Yeah, because our zone is getting picked apart every week.
Well, it's because for whatever reason, they're coaching that zone to lay off 10 yards from the line. I'm like, why are you doing that? That's stupid.
Yeah, unless you're playing a chess match where that's the right thing to do, that's not the right thing to do.
Right.
And
exactly. If you're expecting them to take shots all day, it's the right thing to do. But we're talking about Grant Wells, and Virginia Tech does not like to take shots with him. He's just not good at it. And so I had no idea why we were playing a soft underneath zone. It didn't make any sense whatsoever.
No. So when they adjusted in the second half, they also started getting more pressure on the quarterback because sometimes they were cheating 5 up to the line and getting in Grant Wells' face. But they were able to do that because they had two solid cover corners. I know Wes McCormick has taken some flack at various points in the season, but I think that he's recovered well and momentum is swinging in his favor. I actually thought McCormick played a pretty decent game last night. Yeah, it is.
I would agree with that. And hopefully Coach Brown saw what we saw in the second half and decides to play more man, because we were very successful with man. And if you watch the Kansas game, I think we played almost zero man against that. And the one thing that people don't understand about that Kansas game is they kept their game plan hidden as far as what they were going to do against West Virginia. Nobody was expecting a spread look triple option type of option. I've never heard of that before, but apparently that was the plan the entire time. They just weren't showing it anywhere, and West Virginia was not prepared. Our gap, integration was not good, and they were hitting our gaps hard. We were not prepared for that. So hats off to Kansas for coming up with a very creative game plan. It was super creative. It was almost like a mix between what Georgia Tech used to do and what Rich Rod did at West Virginia. It was almost like a combination of the two, and it worked to perfection. So it makes a lot more sense after hearing what Neil Brown said, after watching the game, what happened in that Kansas game, because if you watch the game, the announcers are like, I don't like the body language of the West Virginia defenders. They look lost, whatever. And
they were lost.
It was because they were. Yeah. They didn't know what. Brown said that they did not use the same look more than 4 times the entire game, or they didn't. It's either they didn't use the same look more than 4 times, or they didn't use more than 4 looks. Either or. Basically, they used a scheme to where it would confuse the defense, and that's why our defense looked confused, because they were legitimately confused.
Yeah, they put a lot of window dressing around it.
Right.
The offense that plays today, that Kansas, their game plan was closest to, is Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
It looked very similar to that with its own wrinkles. I mean, they were.
I think Appalachian State too. The Sun Belt actually, honestly, whenever you watch the way Kansas schemed West Virginia offensively, it actually reminded you a lot of Sun Belt football. They actually do a lot of that in the Sun Belt. That's actually what gave Texas A&M some issues in their game.
Maybe Kansas is preparing for the Sun Belt. You should do a video on that.
Speaking of which, thank you, Sorgy Storage, for the $5 donation. Said, this one don't make sense, but I'm going to read it. It says, sources, ACC administrators had informal discussions about possible Pac-12, Big 12 additions or mergers. So per ESPN, so they're talking about the ACC either adding or merging with some Pac-12 or Big 12 teams. And I saw some other channels talking about it, and that's why I did my video earlier. That's a real thing, especially now the Pac-12 and ACC, that's already fallen off. That's already fallen apart. So I don't know why ESPN said that. But the big thing right now is the ACC is, like, for real, legitimately talking about a Big 12 merger. And, you know, I've been talking about West Virginia going to the ACC, but I counter that by saying I would be okay with West Virginia staying in the Big 12 if we were to get, Pitt, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. Those 4 teams, those are the teams that I want to play the most. If we got those 4 teams, I would be fine with that. So if it was a straight merger or they picked off a chunk, including West Virginia, that's like heaven. Like, that's even better than anything I could think of. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it's true. I don't know how serious they are, but they are real rumors. And now ESPN is starting to report it. So it's possible. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but because of what I'm seeing, it's possible. Chris Klein, thank you for the $5 donation. Southwest Classic tomorrow. I have Arkansas beating A&M 35-28. They talk too much smack, and now Arkansas is going to smack them in the mouth. Yeah, A&M is not a well-coached football team. They have a lot of talent over there. they should be competing for SEC titles year after year after year, and they find themselves 8-4. Now in 2020, they had one loss, but it was a shortened season, so there was less opportunities to lose. But my gosh, Jimbo Fisher, I don't think he's a very good head coach. Great recruiter, but not a good head coach. Aaron, man, these super chats are coming in fast, by the way. Aaron Alley, thank you for the $5 donation. I'm so happy for you of H. Basketball. Hold on. Basketball is my thing. I got you. Yeah, last year Houston had a really good basketball team. I understand now. I was lost there for a second. Speaking of which, hold on. Let me get this off my chest, then we can move on. I heard today that there's serious talks. This is going to blow your mind, and I heard it from multiple sources. I'll probably make a video on it tomorrow because I heard this kind of later on in the day. Didn't have time. Texas A&M talking to Urban Meyer, and not just talking to him, but like a massive contract. And honestly, I'm not taking it serious, but it's a good enough rumor, a good enough talking point that I have to make a video, even if it's serious or not, because Jimbo Fisher is, he'd be owed a hefty buyout. So the reason I mentioned that is because Will Klein mentioned the Arkansas, Texas A&M. They've already lost to Appalachian State. How impatient is Texas A&M going to be with Jimbo Fisher? And then we heard, West Virginia people talking about how they wanted Jimbo, and Jimbo said never say never. Honestly, I don't want Jimbo, okay? I know he's a West Virginia guy through and through, but seeing what he's done with the talent that Texas A&M has been able to get in, West Virginia's not recruit like that. How would you feel about, and this is assuming the season falls apart. This is straight hearsay, people, okay? Straight hearsay. But if all that happened, how would you feel about that?
I have mixed feelings. I mean, Jimbo had some good years. Won a national championship, obviously. But Florida State was recruiting the heart of Florida at the time and retaining a very large percentage of it. He had, a plethora of athletes to play with, and it was, it was kind of a simpler time in college football. The X's and O's were not nearly as complicated as they are now. And I wonder. I mean, I don't watch a bunch of Texas A&M football. Of course, he would say that.
Hey, Jimbo would be an upgrade over Hogerson. I will say that.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And I think Houston fans understand what we were talking about.
They're starting to see it. Yes, sir. And it started last year whenever Houston got slammed by Texas Tech and Cincinnati. And everybody throws the whole 12-2 in my face. I'm like, look at their freaking schedule. They beat a bunch of Tulsas, East Carolinas, and blah, blah, blah. Terrible, terrible teams. And the only decent teams that they played, they got slammed. And they barely beat a terrible Auburn who barely made a bowl. Fast forward to this year, they've gotten beat by the only two Big 12 teams that they've played, Texas Tech and Kansas. So they're starting to see it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and they got Kansas punched them in the mouth a lot harder than they punched us in the mouth.
Oh, my gosh. They dominated that game. I did see a trend, though. Kansas did the same exact thing to them as they did with us, except to a much higher degree. If you notice, I think it was from the end of the second quarter to the third quarter, they were down 28-14, and they scored 4 unanswered touchdowns and went up. I think it was either 35-28 or 42-28. I think it was 42-28. And they did the same thing to Houston. Houston was up 14-0. And then Kansas scored 4 unanswered touchdowns and made it 28-14 and never looked back. So apparently they like scoring 4 straight touchdowns in a row.
Yeah.
Not a bad game plan, is it?
Something about it, man. Adds to the energy.
Absolutely.
Listen, so let's talk about those running backs. So another thing that I said sort of before the game, and I've got a couple text messages with some buddies to prove it, is that I mean, I don't dislike Tony Mathis, but I said, look, I think the better tandem for us is Justin Johnson and C.J. Donaldson.
Yes.
And look what happened. I mean, Tony Mathis, fumbled that football, and it was one of the quickest times I've ever seen Neil Brown yank a player for a mistake.
Yeah. And it was nice to see that.
Other than Garrett Green.
Yeah.
But
he also put him in so quick, and that didn't make sense. But yeah, I understand, and I'm glad he did that too, because to me it looks like, I don't know, it looks like Mathis has some confidence issues now. Like, he's made a few mistakes, and now he's not confident in himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Frankly, I think one of the bigger problems with Mathis is that Donaldson and Johnson are picking up the run blocking obligations a lot more quickly.
Did you see that blitz pickup? I think it was
Johnson.
Johnson. He ended that linebacker.
Yeah.
I mean, he straight up flipped him like a pancake.
Yeah, no, I definitely wrote that in my game notes. How impressive that was. That's how you block out of the backfield.
Yes.
He picked him up. He knew the right assignment, and he flipped the dude over. He wasn't expecting it.
Right, and kept it legal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Daniel's jersey was clean until like almost the end of the third quarter.
Yes.
Our offensive line played a really good game yesterday, and I know that Virginia Tech hasn't played the best of opponents the first 3 games of the year, but they were dialing up pressure, man. Their defensive line is not elite, but it's not terrible either.
Right.
What they have, like 10 and a half, 11 sacks in the season.
Yeah, I'd say Virginia Tech's a good top 30 defense, but it's not elite enough to make up for that offense. That offense is bottom. It could be bottom 20.
Yeah, no, that offense is bad.
And we stopped the one thing that they like to lean on, and that's the rush. I think they only had like 35 yards rushing. So once we were able to stop that, they didn't have a game plan.
In the first half, I think they averaged like a yard a carry. I mean, that's ridiculously low. And they brought that up because there was that one time that Wells successfully snuck the football 10 yards.
Right.
And then they ended the game with 1.9 yards per carry. That's an impressive number to hold over an entire game.
What about whenever I'm wanting to say it was either 4th and 4 or 4th and 5 or 4th and 6 for Virginia Tech, and they tried a motion quarterback sneak. I mean, I'm glad they called that because it was a terrible call, but that surprised me. That was a bad call for 4th down.
Yeah, well, that in the other 4th and 1 that they had, where they just did they called timeout and then they did the cornerback sneak. And got shut down, and it's like that's what you called the timeout to get set up, was that? But again, I'm not going to complain. The thing that bothered me in the first half was that, but for Grant Wells' inability to hit the deep ball, that game would have looked a little bit different. That's why I was glad to see the adjustments at halftime, because Brown is looking at that saying, we kind of got lucky that their quarterback's not good. And in ensuing weeks, we're going to face some pretty good quarterbacks. We need to get this fixed up right now. And he made the adjustment, put Spells in more, and the secondary looked a lot better after that.
I think Spells will start the entire season next year. I really do. I think he's that good. He'll probably end up starting like the last 5 or 6 games this year as well. I mean, I knew he's going to be like that, but I just didn't know how, because sometimes it's different for the speed of the game to slow down to different players. People don't understand there's a different speed from high school to college to the NFL, and some players it takes a little longer for that speed to slow down for them to where they're seeing the field correctly.
Yeah, well, you know what? That interception, that pick 6 that he had, that was a football intelligence play.
Yes.
He's very athleticism. He has that in abundance, but he read what was happening, and he picked that ball off. I mean, it was like,
well, he came down, and then he saw Grant's shoulders kind of square back, and he dropped back off, and that's when he picked it off. That was amazing eyesight and intelligence, because he had his body turned, so it didn't seem like that he'd be able to, get back into the right position to make that pick. But apparently he was reading the quarterback's shoulders perfectly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a smart play. And the reason I say that is you don't make that kind of a smart play unless you're not really thinking, you're just playing and reacting.
Right. Exactly. That goes back to the game slowing down for you.
Yeah, no, it's evidence that it is slowing for him, and that's good. I sort of thought Spells was going to get burned towards the end of the year, mostly because Charles Woods, but with Charles Woods hurt, it maybe accelerated the timeline, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, I was worried because Woods went out, and I saw Brown not using Spells a lot, but maybe Spells has won over his confidence, and he'll put him in there to start the game. That's what he needs to do for sure. So it is a good win, but let's not kid ourselves. Virginia Tech is a bad team. So the takeaway that I'm getting from this game is we finally did what I thought we were capable of doing. It took us a half to figure it out, but we did figure it out. And if we can play an entire game like we did the second half against Virginia Tech, I think we can get to a bowl. Even though we got behind, 0-2 to start the year, there's some winnable games as long as we play like the way we did in the second half against Virginia Tech. So I'm very happy. I'm glad it wasn't like a close, we beat a bad team by, 3 points or whatever. No, we blew them out like we were supposed to do. So that's what gives me confidence that maybe we can bounce back, especially, the Kansas game. I know Kansas is better than what people realize, but it still messes with your head a little bit because you lost to Kansas. It doesn't matter that they're good this year. You lost to Kansas. That sticks in your head. Kansas is supposed to be the gimme win of the Big 12. Obviously, they're not, but West Virginia didn't know that because we were their first victim. There was no precedent to show us, how good they are. Now that we know, we feel a little bit better. But whenever it happened, it was like a gut punch. Like, well, there was our gimme game. So there goes our season. Our only win's going to be FCS Townsend. Are they going to beat us? Is Townsend as good? Then you really start thinking crazy thoughts. But now that we realize how good Kansas is, we can kind of relax on that and kind of look into the future. And as you can see, I am already looking into the future. I know Texas has a game tomorrow, but our next game is on the road to number 22 Texas in Austin. I feel a little bit better about it. What do we need to do to win that football game?
I mean, it's Neil Brown said a few things last night that were intriguing to me, because he kind of admitted that he shared our frustrations with the way that we lost against Pitt and Kansas.
Right.
It was a few mistakes, but we were close. And we keep hearing that, and we're like, close doesn't cut it, dude.
Like, take a step.
And what he said about Virginia Tech was, we did what we were supposed to do in that game. Last year we beat them barely. This year we beat them convincingly. Right. And the team was close, and now it's better. And offensively, we had a couple of missed touchdown opportunities in the red zone that were field goals instead. We left 8 points on the board easily.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, I think and Virginia Tech shouldn't have scored that touchdown. It should have been I think the math that I did, it should have been 21-3 at halftime, because Virginia Tech shouldn't have scored that touchdown, but 2 penalties extended their drive, and then we made mistakes, and we go into halftime. What was it, 13-6? I think it's what, because we scored a touchdown 11 seconds before, and that helped too. That helped change the game as well. So honestly, it was West Virginia's mistakes that kept Virginia Tech in the football game. And I mean, Neil Brown's a smart guy, so he knows, that mistakes is what lost us 2 games and what kept Virginia Tech in the game as long as it did. We play good enough to win football games, but then we make stupid mistakes, It's almost like take 2 steps forward, but 3 steps backwards.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's item number one. In order to beat Texas, you have to limit the mistakes, because one thing that Texas is not going to do, they're not going to gift us 15 penalties for 134 yards.
Right.
They're not going to do that.
Right.
If
the officiating was terrible, though. It was bad.
We don't know which quarterback is going to be ready to go for Texas, but whoever it is, they throw the football better than Grant Wells does.
Yeah, I agree with Aaron Alley. Thank you for the $5 donation, by the way. W can do it, but their defense needs to show up. And I think our defense does show up, but they show up and make mistakes is the problem. So West Virginia's defense needs to show up, and on top of that, not make mistakes. If we play like we did in the second half last night, we're good. We're going to win a lot of football games. But as a West Virginia fan, we're not won over yet because we remember the games before last night. So let's see this, again and again and again, and then we can have confidence in the defense.
Well, it calls to mind one thing. I'm gonna switch the subject a little bit to Caden Prather for a moment. But what I saw last night, for example, from Caden Prather was what the coaching staff challenged him to do in the preseason. Was Caden Prather is really good,
yes,
and he has some really good plays. But what he has to learn to do is string good plays together in successive fashion, and then string good days together in successive fashion. And I thought Caden Prather did that. He showed up last night.
Yes.
And the defense, it's the same concept. The defense has to do the same thing. 3 plays out of 5, they play very good. But those 2 plays out of 5, in the middle of the 3 plays out of 5, you see what happens. Depending on where that 4th and 5th play is.
Yep.
If
one thing that needs to happen, Neil Brown needs to get Reese Smith out of receiving punts. The dude does not know what he's doing. Every time I see him back there and I see him running to catch the punt, I'm like, dude, if your feet are moving, that means you should not be catching it. Why does he do that? Like, okay, if you have your feet planted and you're ready to receive, that's fine. But that one punt, which he muffed, he was running from left to right trying to – it's like he's trying to catch – it's not a pass, dude. That's a live ball if it touches you and bounces off you. It's not incomplete. If it stays in bounds, that's a live ball. So he either needs to learn that it's a live ball if it hits him and back off. Hey, if I'm moving, I'm not catching. Or Neil Brown needs to yank him. That dude, it's lucky that ball went out of bounds because Virginia Tech could have had really, really good field position. And then once again, we're looking at stupid mistake keeps Virginia Tech in the game.
Yeah, no, that's right. I don't know what the answer is.
Nobody out there. Just try to block it every time. I don't care. It's better than muffing it.
Yeah. That may be right. Like whatever. If the punt rolls 15 yards, Hey, look what happened in the second drive of the game. Teams exchange punts, and then Virginia Tech wins the field position battle, and they down the punt inside the 1-yard line.
Yep.
We marched the whole field and kicked a field goal. We stalled out in the red zone, but we obviously don't have problem driving 99 yards.
Right. That's another thing that we have to figure out more consistently. And that comes down to receivers catching the ball because, once again, tell the 2 halves. In the first half, we were in the red zone, 4 times and came away with, I think it was 6 points or what? No, it might have been the 13 points, but still 4 opportunities and a couple field goals. No, it was 6, a couple field goals. That's not going to cut it. You can't. If you get in the red zone, it's time to at least get a touchdown every other time. Even that's not great, but it's not too much to ask for. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and I think I think what JT Daniels continues to say is right. That we continue to fix execution issues on the offense every week,
Right.
and it will continue to get better. the other thing I liked, and we haven't really spent any time on it, but because we kind of forget.
I agree, Packer 19.
We we actually had 2 games since our last episode.
Yeah.
And we played FCS Towson. Now, yeah, you should beat FCS Towson convincingly. It's a
But
good
they didn't
game.
allow a single touchdown on defense. That's actually impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Towson barely had any yards, and we scored on every drive in that game.
Right. That's impressive.
And that's what you're supposed to do. That's your tune-up. That's like you're playing a live defense that's not as good as any other defense you will play in the rest of the season, but it's sort of an exhibition of, can my guys execute under ideal conditions? And absolutely they could. So, we had that game, we won it, then we go into Virginia Tech and we're like, let's learn another thing or two about this team. And we did. And they have a few execution issues to push up. They're going to be playing a very tough. I mean, Texas's defense looks very tough.
Yes.
That's going to be a big.
Offense not great though. Offense not great.
No, not yet. But
did you watch the UTSA game? UTSA had an actual chance to win the game. They were in the game for a very long time. Texas did win, but Texas offense has not looked good. I know they only lost by 1 to Alabama, but it was because of their defense. It was kind of the same story against UTSA. So that's a good matchup for us because that's literally the same exact matchup that we had last night against Virginia Tech. Terrible offense, pretty good defense. So I'm feeling better about Texas because their offense isn't looking good. And I know they have a bunch of studs and stars, and maybe it'll get figured out. I don't know. But it's literally the next game. It's not like we're talking about we're playing Texas at the end of the year. So we'll see if they get better. It's literally next week. Our offense is top 10, and theirs is not. It's not good at all. They have a great defense, but like we saw last night, that's a good matchup for us. So I'm liking our chances, and I don't think that's going to be quite as hostile of a road environment as Virginia Tech. So I think we have a chance now. But if we would have lost last night, I would have said no. It's not happening. If we can't beat lowly Virginia Tech, we're certainly not going on the road and beating Texas. And there's 3 teams that I feel a lot better about beating now, not just because of winning last night, but because I'm seeing some issues with them. The first one is the game after the bye week. Number 17, Baylor comes to town. Baylor's offense, something's wrong with Baylor's offense. Their defense is fine, not great, but it's fine. It's good enough. And the thing that really makes me raise my eyebrows is Bohannon, the quarterback from last year that led them to that amazing Big 12 championship and the win against Pitt in the Peach Bowl, got beat by Shapen, and Shapen is not doing very well. So I'm like, did they just see something in practice that made him look better, but that's not really the case? And now they're kicking themselves in the rear end for letting Bohannon go, and they're starting Shapen. I like our chances against Baylor in Morgantown because Baylor's offense doesn't look nearly as good as what it was last year. Have you seen Baylor?
Yeah, I've seen highlights. I haven't watched any of their complete games yet. But yeah, I mean you're not wrong. I mean they did it against Albany to open up the season. They finally played a team with a pulse in the out of conference with BYU, and they lost. And they only managed 20 points in what that was a double OT game, right?
26 to it was double OT.
So
26-20, I think it was 26. It was either 26-20 or 26-23. Yeah.
But you only managed 20 points in 2 OTs. The offense isn't clicking, and then
we saw BYU against Oregon. BYU doesn't have a good offense. Oregon blew them out, so that's not a good sign for Baylor because it shows that all they had to do was score 4 touchdowns and they would have beat them because BYU doesn't have a great offense. So I think Baylor does have issues on offense. I do.
Well, and Baylor Baylor had some attrition in both their secondary and on their offensive line, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's keeping Chapin from being good is getting comfortable in the pocket.
Yeah.
That's just not happening. He's not getting.
And Baylor fans were saying that was what they were most happy about because they returned their offensive line because a lot of their skill players, they had a lot of turnovers. So, that was the rock that they were relying on, and the rock that they're relying on is not looking good at all.
I see. Maybe I'm thinking of a different team. I thought they had lost 2 of the 5.
I thought. I mean, you might be right. Baylor fans were saying, were telling me that they had 4 starters come back, and the other guy was legit as well. I could be wrong.
But one thing, it's like what we talked about with Deggy last year, right? If Deggy gets the ball out a half a second faster, he doesn't get sacked nearly as often. But a quick release quarterback and skill players who can get open quickly and take advantage of the ball in space can mask offensive line deficiencies.
So that's their issue. It seems like the receivers can't find the spot fast enough.
Might be. I'll be interested to watch. I mean, I'll watch several Baylor games before we play them. In a couple of weeks. We got the bye week right before Texas and Baylor.
Right after Texas. Right after Texas.
And then we play Baylor on Thursday. So you know what? We've got like a 12-day break after Texas. So yeah, in a couple of weeks, I'll watch some Baylor games, see what they look like, and figure out if what I'm guessing is the case is indeed the case. But based on how Baylor played last year, I'm thinking that's got to be the difference.
Yeah, they had a lot of turnover at skill position too, so there's a lot of new faces learning their position. But I like her chances in that game in Morgantown. 2 other games that I was scared of that I'm not as scared of. Kansas State, they lost to Tulane last week, 17-10. That was surprising. Their offense is Adrian Martinez, highly touted out of high school, and man, he can't find his groove at Kansas State. And Kansas State, they can't score points. I like her chances there in Morgantown. And then finally Oklahoma State too, because their offense is great, but their defense has taken a significant step back as well.
I don't know why people were sort of as high on Adrian Martinez as they were. I mean, he didn't show. Well, he was at Nebraska first, right? And he didn't show anything there. Nebraska fans ran him off. And what was going to be different in Manhattan? Nothing. I mean, I know there were a lot of people high on Kansas State going into the season, but I was definitely not one of them. We disagreed on that point, as I recall.
Yeah. I fell into that trap. Yep. I admit it, but I feel good about that game. And then Oklahoma State, I expect that to be a shootout game because their defense has taken a pretty noticeable step back this year. But so far, their offense looks pretty good. So they might have turned into what West Virginia has turned into this year, more offense than defense. But I like our chances more. I'm not saying that I think we'll definitely win, but I like our chances more than I did in the preseason because they had a lockdown defense last year, and that was a bad problem. See, whenever I did my preseason prediction, I based it on what I saw last year and maybe a few changes in the offseason. And what I saw last year is West Virginia always had issues with teams that had defenses that were as good as West Virginia's or better because our offense wasn't good. So whenever we came up with against a team that had the defense that we did or better, that was a big problem because we can't score points. They stop us, and their offense can score points. It happened with Oklahoma State, and it happened with Minnesota. Those were the 2 big mismatches. So going into this game, I thought, I heard Oklahoma State's defense return so many players. Derek Mason coming in, so it's not going to be that much of a drop-off from Knowles. But it looks like it is a significant drop-off this year.
Yeah, and I don't know what to think about Iowa State yet. I mean, they finally, they shook Iowa off their back, but, Iowa can't score points to save their lives.
My gosh, they're averaging like 6.5 points a game.
Yeah.
That basically, you're telling your defense, hey, if you allow a touchdown, we lose. Don't allow a touchdown.
Right. Yeah, and that's not ideal.
Aaron Alley, I appreciate your $5 donation. Says, can I get your opinion on how U of H will do in basketball this year? I'll do that probably sometime middle of November. Right now, my gear is still college football for sure, but I do start transitioning and sprinkle in basketball videos in November. Then, of course, when football shuts down in March Madness, it's a lot of basketball. So if you're into basketball, November, I'll start sprinkling those in. And I think West Virginia is going to have a good basketball team this year as well. One team that I'm more scared of than I was in the preseason, Oklahoma. Dude, they look like a playoff team. I'm telling you, man. The defense taking that significant step that everybody thought they would under Brent Venables, but the offense surprisingly good. Very, very good.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them. I'm waiting for them to be tested by a legit Power 5 team. Nebraska, they fight. Look, Nebraska was so anxious to let Scott Frost go after that loss that if they had waited 2 weeks, they would have saved several $1 million, and they were like, screw it, we got to get rid of this guy right now.
Everybody was expecting the firing to come in after the first week of October because of that.
Yeah, and they basically said, nah, we're gonna pay all the money.
Yeah.
So Nebraska gave up 31 points to Northwestern, 17 to North Dakota, 45 to Georgia Southern, and 49 to Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is scoring points, but it was kind of like Virginia Tech's defense. You wondered, all right, look, they played Wofford, which is averaging – the only touchdown Wofford scored in 3 games was against Virginia Tech.
Yep.
They played
that
Wofford.
Told me just how bad Virginia – whenever I saw the final score of that, I was like, we're going to beat Virginia Tech. Whenever I'm like, we're going to beat them. Of course, we had a bad first half, but we still slaughtered them just like I expected because their offense is bad. And then you allow Wofford to score a touchdown.
Yeah, no, that's
they're like bottom of the barrel. There's FCS, and then there's Wofford. Like they're I think 122nd out of 123. Like their actual ranking.
Yeah, they're not a good team. So is Oklahoma's offense a little bit of a mirage, like maybe Virginia Tech's defense was? We don't know. We'll have time to figure that out. They have looked good. The defense has looked extremely solid, as we thought it would. But frankly, that's the game that I'm like, I really want us to be able to come out of that one with the W and shake Oklahoma off the back before they leave the greener pastures in the SEC.
Yeah, especially from what I heard a couple weeks ago that Oklahoma and Texas have been negotiating with the Big 12 to get the exit by 2023. So this could for real be our last opportunity to get a win against them in the Big 12. I think quick flashback to the Big East days, man. Syracuse might be going 4-0. They're beating Virginia at halftime 16-0. Could Syracuse get ranked this coming week?
Man, it's they're just all the basketball schools are continuing their
Duke is undefeated. Kansas and Duke play each other. They're both undefeated. Syracuse is undefeated. UConn still sucks. Sorry,
Did
UConn.
you see? That's a sellout crowd in Kansas.
Yes.
And I one of my friends made the joke. They're like, I wonder if everybody thought it was a basketball game.
That's funny. And their stadium, I think their stadium holds like right around 50,000, something like that. So people don't realize it's not like a super small. I mean, it's not massive, but we've just grown accustomed to not seeing it full. So I'm interested to see the atmosphere that Kansas is going to bring tomorrow. I have Kansas beating Duke by 3 touchdowns at least. I don't think Duke is a very good football team at all, and Kansas is going to score at will on Duke. But it's going to be fun to see the atmosphere. And then this year, Texas has to go to Kansas. So if Kansas continues to be good, that's going to be a sellout. And then Texas is going to be in a hostile road environment to Kansas. What? Is this 2007 again? What am I seeing?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I just looked. David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium seats 47,233 fans. So it is still on the small side, but it is not minuscule.
Right. It's bigger than a Wake Forest, a Washington State, an Oregon State, but not as big as West Virginia. So it actually holds more than Baylor's football stadium. Think about that. Yeah, Baylor only holds 45,000. Now it has footers to where they can add it to around 65,000, I think. But the way it's constructed, Baylor Stadium looks like it could hold 70,000, but its listed capacity is 45,000. They just built it extremely smart. Extremely smart. It was actually a downgrade in capacity from Floyd Casey, their old stadium. Their old stadium held 60,000 without the tarp. So,
yeah, I'm just looking at like a ranking. I don't know. I haven't. It's from College Gridirons, but
Aaron Alley, thank you for the $5 donation. Yeah, man. If you're not feeling good, I understand, but thank you for supporting the show. You're a great supporter of Voice of College Football and going to Blue Dudes. So if you're not feeling good, man, get you some rest. Get some rest.
But here are some of the Power 5 stadiums that have a smaller capacity than Kansas. Kansas State, Stanford.
Kansas State? I thought they had a 50,000 seat stadium. What?
Well, so I haven't fact checked this. I'm just looking at a ranking from College Gridirons, but
okay, I got you.
They actually have Kansas listed a little bigger at 50,071.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought Kansas held.
So if the lower number is right, then Kansas State and Stanford are just bigger than they are.
Well, here's the thing. I think it was 47,000, but Kansas actually did a renovation, and I actually think that their stadium does hold more than 50,000. So that list that you're looking at might actually be right.
Right, but either way, they're sort of on par with Kansas State, Stanford, Syracuse, Northwestern, and they're definitely bigger than Oregon State, Baylor, Utah, TCU, Boston College, Vanderbilt, no surprise there. Duke, no surprise there. Washington State.
I like this name on the screen, by the way. Hunter Goatfro, not Winfro, Goatfro. Thank you for the $2 donation. Says ACC is quietly a solid conference this year. Yeah, because you have Duke undefeated. Now I think Duke's not a good undefeated, but Syracuse. I think Syracuse is a good undefeated. Clemson's still undefeated. North Carolina's still undefeated. NC State's still undefeated. Florida State's still undefeated. The ACC's having an up year this year. I will say that for sure. Pitt's taking a big step back, but there's a lot of teams that have stepped up and kind of taken their place. I actually had Florida State in my top 25 from last week. Barely, but they're there. I think they've done enough to earn a spot. I don't care what anybody says. I don't like Florida, Texas A&M, or Miami in the top 25. I know Florida has a win over Utah, and they were top 10 at the time, but it was the first game of the year, hostile road environment, came down to an interception. You don't go from 43rd to 12th over one win. That was just stupid. Then they come back home, and Kentucky flat out owns them. And then they barely beat USF last week. Florida's not top 10. Texas A&M lost to Appalachian State. I know they beat Miami, but they lost to Appalachian State. They're not top 25. And Miami lost to Texas A&M, so they're not top 25. Put in Washington State, Oregon State, and Kansas in place, and then on deck, I would have Syracuse better over those three teams that I mentioned, Florida, Miami, and Texas A&M. North Carolina has a case. There's a bunch of teams that have a case, but they're going by brand and eye appeal. That's why I hate the AP Top 25. Can't stand it.
Yeah, and it's it's
Popularity contest.
well, it's also like, law of conservation of momentum, right?
Right.
If you're top 25 in the preseason poll, it may not help you if you lose games, but the
Yeah.
teams that beat you, I mean, whether you were inflated or not, if a team in week 1 beats a number 10 team that was way overrated, then they get in top 15, and then they win a bunch of games, and then all of a sudden you're talking about them for the playoff, and it's like, yeah, but who did they beat? Like, they beat a top 10 team that's now 0-5.
Right. Well, a good case. Listen to this. A lot of people do. Oh man, this is nuts, man. So last year, Mississippi State, I think it was Texas A&M that they beat. They went from so they were 4-3, 4-3. Then they beat Texas A&M and went 5-3, 5-3. They went from non-ranked to number 17 just because they beat Texas A&M. Number 17 at 5-3. So that set up Arkansas because Arkansas was in the top 25. Oh, man, they beat the number 17 Mississippi State pretty good. Well, they shouldn't have been ranked number 17 was the problem. And that's the big issue that I have with the AP Top 25. It makes teams look better than what they actually are, and then it doesn't recognize teams that it should recognize. It's a big mess.
Yeah.
Hunter Goatfro says, oops, my bad. That was actually, I'll read that still, even though it's not a super chat. Will ND, good to see you, bud. Thank you for the $1.99 donation. AP should have to wait for playoff poll to come out. Yeah, I'm saying week 8. Hunter Goat says rivalry games are about to become null and void under the upcoming playoff system. I think that's two separate things because I think the rivalries in the regular season are still going to be good. And with conference realignment, eventually we're going to have 2 mega conferences, and a lot of rivalries are actually going to be intact. Rivalries that have been split apart currently. So I actually think that rivalries will be even bigger in the future. We're just in a weird flux period right now, a transition period. But once we get past the transition and get to where we're going to be, I think rivalries will be significant again. I really do. And I think with the playoff system, putting an emphasis on conference championships, add in the fact that conferences are doing away with divisions, I think conference championships are going to be more valuable than they've ever been because you're not going to have like a 9-3 with the possibility of beating the best team. And then the second best team didn't even make the championship because they were in the same division as the best team. Now that divisions are gone, it will be the 2 best teams and possibly battling out for a spot in the playoffs because the top 6 champions get in. So actually they will be battling out for a spot in the playoffs, possibly a bye week. So I'm liking this new playoff format. I think it actually brings back the value of the conference championships, and you add in the fact that divisions are gone away, and that's just a really good recipe of making those conference championships mean something again.
Well, are they currently talking about 6 or are they currently talking about 12?
12.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I actually did not. I used to be not super passionately opposed to expansion, but I was generally opposed to it. And Mark actually changed my mind on it.
Okay.
Mark was responsible for me shifting a little bit because, what he said was, look, right now you have, the last 4 weeks of the season.
I had to put that up. West Virginia tried to give Virginia Tech the game. It's the complete opposite. Anyways, go on. Sorry, that just made me laugh.
Yeah, well,
what made you against it?
I just, probably tradition more than anything. Bowl games were already starting to be meaningless, and Mark said
there's too many of them.
One, it'll give you more relevant postseason games than just the 3.
Yeah.
And maybe a handful of others. But he also said, think about what it's going to do for the last 4 weeks of the season, right?
Yep.
If you have 12 teams in the playoff, then the bottom four are going to be 9-3 type teams. Well,
right. Yeah.
There's a lot of teams that hover around that, 9-3, 8-4 cusp at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Their games are going to matter. They're going to be more relevant, and it really kind of sold me on it. Mark,
I think if people, because the biggest argument, well, it's still going to be the same 4 teams in the end. Okay, I've accepted that. So be it. Okay, it eventually ends up being, your Georgias, your Oklahomas, your Clemsons, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Notre Dames, whoever. I've accepted that. But what this helps is getting better matchups before you get to that point, because we've seen in the playoffs there's going to be blowouts no matter what. There's still blowouts in the national championship. There's more blowouts than close games now. It's just how it is. You have one great team that's just better than everybody else. I've accepted that. What makes playoff expansion better than how it is right now is you will get close matchups before you get to that part. So at least you have a round to where you're going to have some compelling games. Yes, the next round you're going to get to your blowouts and your Alabamas and national championships, blah, blah, blah. But the first round is going to be great, especially if they stick with home playoff games, because college football has never, ever had a home playoff game, and I think that's a shame. And if that happens, that's going to be an atmosphere that is, quite frankly, unfathomable.
Yeah. Well, and think about, I mean, I know that in general, because of free agency, in salary cap, in draft, and sort of the way that the NFL structures its rosters, that there is going to be a little more parity in the NFL than in college football, because college football is just a free-for-all recruiting system.
But you do realize that our senator, Joe Manchin, is working with Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville to work with this NIL to kind of follow the NFL playbook as far as how that goes. So we could be seeing more parity in the future. They're working on it. I don't know exactly the wording and all that stuff. So it's possible is what I'm saying. I don't know what the future holds. So hopefully, because you don't want to see teams being able to monopolize all the talent. Like, I mean, we're seeing it right now. It's not, this could happen. It is happening. So I'm glad that there's some senators out there that are trying to make it at least an even playing field.
Right. But ultimately the point is, like, I'm previewing the argument against what I'm about to say, which is, but in the NFL playoffs, in the last decade, I think we've seen 3 or 4 Super Bowl winning teams come out of that last wild card spot, number 6 ranked teams that weren't, that beat up on number 1 ranked teams and actually blew them out in the AFC Championship. So it's happened in the NFL. Wow. Maybe we get more surprises. I mean, we get more wild things that happen if we expand the college football playoff to 12.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I can't see the future either. But I do think NIL actually might potentially give schools that aren't the 4 or 5 that have traded punches in the last decade a boxer's chance.
Right, exactly. And I agree with that. And especially if they can come out with some guidelines, because whenever they pass this NIL thing, you can tell that they had no guidelines in mind or nothing. It's just like, okay, they can get paid. We don't know, y'all figure it out. So it's kind of like they took this step 3, before they took step 1. Hopefully we play catch up and get back to step 1 and figure out the guidelines. So that way, it's even across the board, because what basically the rules now is whoever has the most money gets the best players. And it shouldn't be like that. I mean, that's not football. That's just whoever has the most money. And the rich will continue to get richer. And college football is going to turn into a joke.
Well, but at some point, like, for now, it's the next, I think we have 2 more years of the current rule where the NCAA said, we're getting rid of the single season cap on recruits because we're trying to normalize this transfer portal.
Right.
But so that's the case. Then, 5 schools get all the 4 and 5 stars out of high school. But you still have the total scholarship count of 85. So if they sign 35 guys at a high school in a class, what do you do now? You don't have anybody left in the 85 person cap, and you have to jettison players that were 4 or 5 stars a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And then those players start transferring to schools that aren't Alabama, schools that aren't Clemson, because those 4 or 5 are trying to, keep up in the arms race. Or the opposite happens, and what Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Georgia and a few other schools do is they say, we're going to get all of our players from the transfer portal. And we're going to leave the high school kids, even most of the 4 stars. We're still going to go after the 5, but we're going to leave all the 4 stars alone. And now all of a sudden you've got 250 players, I think 45% of which go to the top 5 schools every year that are now in the pool for the other schools. So
look at West Virginia. It's happened to them twice when it comes to quarterback, because Will Greer was a 5-star that was recruited to Florida. Eventually, he ended up at West Virginia. Same thing with JT Daniels. He was a 5-star quarterback out of high school, got recruited by USC. Eventually, he ended up with West Virginia. So, it's cool that eventually it happens, but you need something to where schools like West Virginia can, get them immediately instead of, down the road, because you don't know what your team is going to look like down the road. You have a plan right now, and they fit into your plan right now. Now, JT is just a great, phenomenal quarterback. He fits in anywhere, but our defense is in flux. If we would have had JT last year, West Virginia would have been a really, really good team because our defense was solid. So I'm not complaining that West Virginia can get those high caliber through the transfer on down the road, but on down the road is unpredictable. You don't know what type of team you're going to have on down the road. So I would like to be able to recruit, these higher level recruits out of high school immediately and know what we're getting right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In fact, it could be, especially as they now have imposed the portal signing periods as they are this year. A team could form a long-term identity still, even with turnover, because they could say, look, I'm losing my quarterback that plays this style of football. I'm losing my slot receiver, and I'm losing my right tackle.
Right.
And they could say, you know what? Now I need to. There is a list of players that are on the transfer list, and none of us are allowed to talk to any of them until this day. So I know that I've got my list, right? I need this type of quarterback, I need a slot receiver, and I need a right tackle. So whatever my budget is from my alumni to convince people to come to my school is, I get the best possible of those 3 players that fit my style system from the Power 5 institutions, because we're all jettisoning players that don't fit.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. Exactly right. Will Klein, thank you for the $5 donation, says, as a Georgia fan, I don't like what we did to JT Daniels. Talking about last year whenever JT got injured and Stetson stepped in, and whenever JT was fully healed, instead of putting JT, the better quarterback, he stuck with Kirby Smart stuck with Stetson Bennett, and it didn't matter because of their defense. But Georgia fans at the time were super mad because they knew that JT wasn't the best quarterback, or was the best quarterback, and that's how they lost JT, because once again he named Stetson the star this year. But Stetson's looking pretty good this year, so I think it worked out for both teams whenever it comes to that. But as far as last year goes, I can understand the frustration in the moment. But even last year turned out good for Georgia. They won the national championship. Hunter Goatthroat, I love that name. Love it. Thank you for the $2 donation. Says Tony Elliott doing Tony Elliott things right now. Yeah, Virginia is they're not as good as what I was expecting. I think they can still be a bowl team, but I don't know. I think they're going to struggle this year. And Syracuse is really, really good, especially in the Dome.
Let me ask you a question.
Remember when Syracuse and West Virginia were in the Big East, and even when West Virginia was good and Syracuse was bad, we could still lose because it was just that tough to win there.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, beginning of the season, I assumed, like most of us did, that if JT Daniels stays healthy and plays a full season and plays well, that he's gone. He's going to the NFL.
Yeah.
Based on hearing him talk post game, there's a small part of me that thinks, and maybe this is just optimism, like I finally want to have a really good quarterback with a really good defense. And I think some of these young kids that are here now and the ones that are coming in next year are going to upgrade our defense in a way that's significant. But what do you think the chances are that JT Daniels decides to come back for another season? Do you think 1 year is going to be enough for NFL teams to say, yeah, I've been watching your post-game interviews. You're a really smart quarterback. He is. He's the smartest quarterback we've ever had at West Virginia.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they're going to want him. Like, it's not like, oh, man, I'm not high enough. I'm going to play another year. This is going to be totally JT's decision. Like, he's ready right now. But having said that, my percentage of him going to the NFL went from about 95%. Now I have it around 60%. Because here's the thing, JT is ready for the NFL, but JT is also he's not just a smart quarterback. He's a smart individual, okay? So there's other things that factor into this, like schooling, when he's going to graduate, all that stuff, what kind of field he's pursuing beyond football. JT is well-grounded. He's not making football just his life. He's going to have backups to that because, things happen. He's very intelligent. And I think he likes West Virginia a lot too. And he comes off as the type of person where even if he has an opportunity immediately in the NFL, if he likes a place a lot, he might actually hang around longer knowing that he'll still have that opportunity in the NFL, barring injury, God forbid. But he knows he's going to have that for the next year. So maybe he'll want to enjoy another year at West Virginia because from what I've heard, he's liked it better than when he was at Georgia or USC, in spite of us starting 1-2, now 2-2. He really likes being at West Virginia.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking like the kind of vibe that I get from his post-game pressers are, I really believe in this team. I still believe in this team. We've got things we're working on. We're really close. We're getting better. Almost like an unfinished business mentality about it.
And that's what I think could carry him on to next year because he'll know that the defense that the offense is sewed up. We're going to have a bunch of our receivers come back. He's going to be back. Our entire offensive line will be back once again. Minus one. There's one person. I can't think of his name. Is it Mentor? The one guy that can graduate?
Yeah. Gamitter is definitely, I think, I'm 90% sure he's out of eligibility.
Yeah.
Frankly, Gamitter has been the lowest graded offensive lineman every single game this year, and he's jumped a lot, and he's broken his assignment a lot. Frankly, I kind of think maybe Gamitter is the last remaining link on that unit.
So he's going to have a stud offensive line that he's going to know personally from a year playing with them. They're going to be back. Our running back stable, they're not about to graduate. Donaldson, a freshman. Mathis still has a couple years. Johnson's a freshman. Our wide receivers, I think we lose Sam James, but other than that, they're all young as well. I'm not sure about Bryce Ford. We had to check on him.
Yeah, we lose Ford Wheaton too. But,
okay.
We get Prather. We get Reese back.
Gallagher's coming in too.
And Gallagher. I was just going to say Gallagher's like a game-changing athlete, man.
Yeah, you might want to play with him too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff for him. And the way he thinks, he knows that the NFL is always going to be there. And he'll actually have a chance to improve his stock even more. I don't know how he thinks. He might want to be the number one overall pick, and it comes out he gets, scouted, and he's the number 15 pick, and that's not good enough for him. He wants to be the number 1 pick, so he comes back for a year knowing all the weapons, an experienced offensive line. The defense is going to be even better. I'm telling you, the chances are higher than people realize.
Yeah, well, I just thought to end it, maybe I'd throw that out there as a question, because
I like it.
I'm kind of thinking a little more about it than I did at the beginning of the season. I just kind of thought JT was one and done, and now I'm not so sure based on some of the stuff.
I've definitely backed out too. Real quick, thank you, Will Klein, for the $5 donation. Says, granted, I will give Stetson his due. He can scramble really well. JT can't, and Stetson is still a good quarterback. Yeah, Stetson has taken a tremendous step forward this year. JT can't scramble, but his pocket awareness is unfreaking believable. I got to see it in person, and I was in the end zone, so whenever they were marching towards the other, that's when I got a real good view of the pocket collapsing, and the dude knows where his spots are. He only got sacked one time last night, and they were getting a lot of pressure on him. But his pocket awareness, he doesn't need to scramble. His pocket awareness is so high that he doesn't need to scramble. And then on top of that, our running backs are blocking at an elite level right now. I loved that block that Johnson put on that linebacker. That was a great block. So real quick before we get out of here, our next game, Texas has a game tomorrow, but our next game is Texas. How are we feeling about that?
It's kind of like we talked about earlier. I mean, we have to play a more perfect game than we've played so far, but if we do that, we do have a chance. It's not impossible. We've beaten Texas under worse conditions. And we've lost to Texas under better. So it's to me, it's a little bit of a toss-up. But we'll know more after this week, and we'll have all Friday of next week to talk about it, because we don't have a game between now and next show.
Exactly. But I'm starting early, camera. As you can see, I'm already preparing for it. I've already started Horns Down week.
Horns are always down.
Yeah, always. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. Always have fun with you. I thought it was a great show. Hopefully you had fun. And we're going to be doing it again next week. Of course.
All right. Well, everybody that's jumped in and given donations and whatnot, we appreciate all of you. And Chris, we'll see you next week.
All right, buddy. You have a good night, man, and a good weekend.
All right, you do the same.
See you next Friday, bud. All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up. Appreciate everybody that stopped by, everybody that commented. Hey, make sure to hit the like button on the way out. Even though it's not going to be live anymore, it still helps us get views. It really helps the video. I don't know why more live shows don't emphasize that like button and explain why it's important. So if you would, on the way out, give us a like. And appreciate everybody that hit the super chat button. Every little bit helps. That's what keeps these live shows going. This is what we do for a living. So you guys keep the lights on and keep the microphones on as well. So appreciate y'all. Hopefully y'all have a great weekend. Whoever you root for, I can rest easy. My team has already played yesterday. Black Diamond Trophy champs for the foreseeable future. There is no game scheduled between West Virginia or Virginia Tech as of right now. It's going to be at least 5 or 6 years out in the future. So the Black Diamond Trophy will be in Morgantown for a while. I was kind of scared because we won it last year, and then if we would have lost it this year, we would have only had it for 1 year. And Virginia Tech had it from 2018 to up till last year, so they had it for an extended time. But we won. That's all that matters. I'm happy. On to Texas. Horns down, always. I've started my celebration early. Y'all have a good night. Have a good weekend. And try not to get too stressed out if your team does lose. And I know that's me speaking. I go nuts, and it does affect my health. But life does go on, even if your team loses. I will say that. Anyways, I'm out of here. I'm done yapping. Y'all have a good night, good weekend. College football, week 4. Tomorrow.